determined to take tough action against the culprits, at least if April 3rd missive on the matter is anything to go by. In a letter addressed to the Prime Minister, Robina Nabanja, Museveni says, if somebody took mabati meant for the Karachuna and gave them to people or institutions in his or her constituency, this is political corruption. The ministers involved must take personal responsibility, pay back the value of the mabati they diverted, and will decide on the political action to punish this mistake. For the second category, Museveni is even less forgiving. The second issue are those who took the mabati for personal use. This is not just a political mistake, it is theft. Those involved must both bring back the mabati or equivalent value in money, but also be handled by the police under the criminal laws of the country. I will also take political action once the police has concluded their investigations. Tough talk indeed, but what makes this corruption scandal different from similar ones in the past? If there is a silver lining to the Karamoja relief scandal, it is that it has put to test the government resolve in the fight against corruption. Will the president's threats this time might be more than just talk? In all this, as the ministers and the powerful fall over each other to loot anything their hands can grab on to, the loser is the desperate family in Karamoja. It is each Ugandan unable to access social goods when most in need. All of them victims to a greed that knows no shame, an impunity that fears no consequences. This is the Frontline. Frontline.
Well, a very good evening and good to have you tonight on the Frontline as we discuss matters of national importance. Starting on a very sad note, the death of Keith Muhakanizi has really left the country crestfallen, and we send out our sympathies to the bereaved. My name is Simon Kagwanjala, and tonight we'll be delving deep into the Mabati saga that seems to be dogged in a lot of scandal, drama, controversy, tensions, and lots of other dimensions, other dynamics that seem to be driving the agenda. As we speak, the controversy surrounds the president's letter, where the president is directing whoever received these iron sheets either consciously or unconsciously to return them or pay monetarily in compensation for the iron sheets. What does this actually mean? Is this letter becoming more complicated? Chitutu is in prison. She's made a week in prison, while others are still off the hook. Well, will the news go around more other culprits as we speak? 3, what do we see lying ahead as the saga continues? Tonight I'm joined by the old man, senior fellow, senior journalist, and managing director of the independent publications, Mr. Andrew Mwenda, together with Honorable Winnie Kiza, former member of parliament and former leader of opposition in parliament, together with the frontliner, Honorable, or rather Mr. Ofono Opondo. Good to have you, old man.
It's my pleasure to be hosted by you, my grandson, Kagwanjala.
Well, we are growing together.
No, pouring white powder in your hair and beard does not mean you're growing old. But growing it organically like me shows that you're 110.
One day we'll be interrogating that age. But well, let's start with the eulogy of the late Keith Muhakanizi. How best can the country celebrate his life?
First of all, I should tell you, Keith and I were very, very, very close friends. So if he was in office, I never knocked. I just walked in. And me and him were always involved in intellectual debates. Rarely did we agree on economic policy, but he was a guy of great intellect. He was very forthright. If his answer to anything was no, it was a no. If it was a yes, you knew where Keith stood on any issue.
Was
So
that the time he was secretary to the Treasury, or
I
even in
knew
the
him
OPM?
when he was advisor. I became friends with Keith, I think, in 1997 as a young journalist. So 1996, he was advisor to Mayan Jankanch, who was the Minister of Finance. From there, he grew from advisor to Minister of Finance. He became Director of Economic Affairs in the Ministry of Finance. From there, he became Deputy Permanent Secretary and Secretary of the Treasury. Then from there, he became Permanent Secretary and Secretary of the Treasury in Finance, from where he went and became Permanent Secretary in the OPM. So throughout all that period, I was always with Keith, most times in his office. If not in his office, we were down in the canteen at the Ministry of Finance having lunch together. He spoke his mind. He was an intelligent man. He believed in reform. Keith, I'm going to write an obituary of him so that people can know what kind of man he was. Keith, Tumusime Mtebile, Damon Kitabire, Chris Kasami, Florence Kutesa, and another lady I can't remember, then Lawrence Kiza. Those were the architects of Uganda's economic reforms in the late 80s, early to mid 90s, early 2000s. This economy really has stood for the last 40 years on their stewardship. They're the ones who were able to convince President Yoweri Museveni that the future of Uganda lies in liberal economic reforms, which included liberalization, privatization, deregulation. I often disagreed with them because I felt that they took those three too far, and I believe that too much of anything is very bad. But Keith never apologized for it because he was so convinced. I think also his greatness was his incredible political skill. He had great political and social intelligence that allowed him to understand that economic reform is not a technocratic process, it's highly political, and therefore you have to mobilize a politically weighted majority in favor of reform. So they were able, and a politically weighted majority does not necessarily mean a large number of people, it means the critical number of those who can make a decision. So he was able to rally President Yoweri Museveni, him collectively with the Mutabiles and the Kasamis, they were able to rally President Yoweri Museveni and keep pillars inside the NRM, plus of course leveraging the power of the weight of the donors to direct Uganda on the particular economic trajectory. The second thing Keith did when he became PSST, and there had been these scandals in OPM and in public service, was to reform public sector finances, introduce the technology of IFMS, the Integrated Financial Management System, that really makes it very difficult to steal government money today. Remember that a lot of that money by the Kazindas was stolen because you could draw cash in 10 billion to go to spend in Karamoja those days or in northern Uganda reconstruction program. What Keith did was to create a single treasury account so that all government money is put on one account, and then they created a technology called the Integrated Financial Management System, where if government had to pay, you had to enter that system, put in your contract, put in the invoices, put in every single thing electronically, and then the accountant general would do, and the accounting officer would just put in a password. By removing cash from government, he closed major leakage nodes in governmental revenues. He was incredible in terms of understanding how the system worked and what interventions you can do to make it work better to serve the citizen. Keith is unmatched.
Does his tenure in the office of the Prime Minister have anything to write home about?
Actually, I have been looking for Keith because he went back for medical checkup without telling me. In the last 2 weeks, I have been frantically calling him, and I realized his phone is off. So it was clear to me that he's gone for a medical review on this Mabat thing. So I was able to interview the Prime Minister, I think a week before last week, Nabanja. And she told me when she went into the ministry, she partnered with him, in fact, to improve accountability for those same iron sheets. And if today we have caught people stealing these iron sheets, it's because of the reforms that Nabanja and Keith worked together on. One of the things they did is to say, no. If we're going to have, previously iron sheets were like all other iron sheets. Whether it was for Karamoja, for OPM or for the market, they were the same. So Nabanja and Keith, the first thing they did is to say, all Mabati that are for government donations must be marked. So they were all put the OPM. That is why when Kitutu's relatives took them to the market to sell, they were easy to catch.
Okay, we'll get to that. Honorable Winnie
Kiza. You asked a question and you are not interested in a full answer to it because you wanted to know what
I'll give you a minute to wind up.
Yes. So that is one, mapping of Mabat. The second thing is throughout he tried to advise the politicians, please, what you are doing people in the Ministry of in the OPM, in Office of the Prime Minister, Keith told them, please try to learn and follow government procedures. Don't do things because they are politically profitable for you. You're going to get yourself into trouble. And it's because those who have found themselves in hot soup, it's precisely because they didn't listen to him.
Well, thank you very much. Honorable Winnie Kiza, what's the legacy that you can discuss about the late Keith Muhakanizi?
First of all, my sympathies to Keith's family, relatives and friends, and to government of Uganda for the loss of such an incredible man. Keith had no regrets to tell you what he believed in.
True.
He, on most occasions, would tell government that some of the policies they were promoting were not viable and were not even good. I remember when government was into the habit of creating so many administrative units, Keith advised against it. He said this is going to ditch the economy, it's going to take us some steps backward, because I know that Uganda doesn't have the money to bear the cost of administration. And he said this many times, though they didn't hear him, we can experience it now.
They heard him, but they didn't listen to him.
Yeah, he advised against excessive borrowing, and he said the country is going down the drain because of the borrowing, because of borrowing too much, and we suffer from constipation. We don't use much of the money that we borrow, and this has an impact on the taxpayer. We had him, we didn't take his advice. So we really have lost a man who was genuine at heart, loved his country, and gave all his knowledge. Whether you believed it or not, he would put it there for you. Very few civil servants can stand up and say this is the correct thing. He would put it there, and for him, you know, I got the privilege of attending meetings where he would sit as first as leader of the opposition, and the other time as a member, as a chairperson of an accountability committee. We sat in many meetings with Keith, and Keith would advise. Many of the issues that he would bring on table would be like issues of the opposition.
He spoke bluntly, but he would always be ignored.
He spoke bluntly, but he would be ignored. The excessive expenditures that he talked about, the excessive corruption that was in our regime, Keith would speak about it, and he would say this country will go down because of corruption. We have allowed people to continue stealing government funds. We close the leakages. They again find other ways of stealing. We are going to suffer because of lack of being cohesive in terms of sticking to the principles. He was a systematic worker, wanted to follow the law to the beat, but he was working in a regime that did not care. And so, Keith, fare thee well. This world is a stage where each one of us comes and you play your part and you leave.
Well, what's your tribute to Keith Muhakanizi?
Well, like the two colleagues have said, I think I'm a little older, although the man with the gray beard claims to be 102 years old.
110. Why
110.
8 years off?
And he's stuck there.
I knew Keith much earlier when he was a junior civil servant in the Ministry of Finance. But of course, he became more prominent when he was a personal assistant.
Advisor.
And then advisor to the late Joash Mayanja Nkanja as Minister of Finance. You would describe Keith as he knew the economics, he was ebullient, which many people took for stubbornness. The combination of Keith and Tumusiime Mutebi in the Bank of Uganda, I think those are the two top civil servants who could hold their ground in front of the president, in front of President Museveni. They would tell of the leadership in parliament, in committees. But of course, as Winner said, they listened to him, they heard him, but they didn't listen to him. The reason the debt, the borrowing grew exponentially, the pilferage almost went out of hand. I know many people will not say this publicly, but also many people around Keith who were his friends happened to be the smart guys who have the new money in Uganda. So you'll ask, how did some of them get the new money? Many of them, or some of them, are the private people who can even lend government money today. And so I don't want to give unqualified credit.
So it's a checkered legacy.
I wouldn't want to give so. I last spoke to Keith 3 weeks ago by phone on the Mabati scandal. I broke out, and we had a long, not one discussion, many, maybe more than 5, and we exchanged the notes. Part of the reason the scandal broke out was because he disagreed with the political leadership in the office of the OPM by the way they were handling the Mabati issues. And he did, even on his sick bed, he did carry out the reforms, for example, stopping the further distribution, the release of the Mabati, and now giving new guidelines on how relief items via the OPM ought to be requisitioned for, ought to be accounted for, ought to be distributed. He was a friend of mine, obviously, for his long service. I think apart from Tumusime, I think was the next long-serving PSSST. And I commiserate with the family.
Well, thank you. We are joined by Honorable Mwanga Chivumbi, Member of Parliament for Butambala County. Good to have you with us, and a good evening.
A great evening, and happy birthday to His Majesty.
Oh yes, it's very important.
Uganda, I also chair the Uganda Parliamentary Caucus in that parliament.
What does that caucus stand for?
Come for a lecture another day. Another day, come for a lecture.
Well, the country is mourning the passing of Keith Muhakanizi. What does it mean? 1, to the economy, 2, to the class of top-notch civil service.
1, I don't have a personal advantage like some of all these other friends of mine. Andrew, long time. I've not seen you for quite some time. You are growing older a little bit.
I cannot be your grandfather and be young.
The project is really small.
We need to have a conversation how one Andrew ended up.
We are going to recruit you
with such a funny project, but for another day. For another day.
You remember when he used to shriek?
You know, we have our history with him for a long time. 1, I don't have a personal privilege of ever being in a space where Keith is. By the time I became heavily involved in financial matters in Parliament, for some reason, Keith was a PS of Ministry of Finance, but I'd stopped ever attending parliamentary sessions, especially Budget Committee, Finance Committee. He would always send junior officers. We found that, but I also had an opportunity to look at the full effect of what they were doing at finance. And yes, I think they did a lot to reform the financial system, to put an infrastructure, a legal regime. I think he worked with Parliament to put up a public finance first the Budget Act, second the Public Finance Management Act. If that Public Finance Management Act had not been tinkered with and amended to give effect and leeway to corruption, would have completely different financial regime. But as you know, even in what you call supplementary expenditures, borrowing, there are stringent conditions. When you read the PFM, you really know we have a good law. Because for everything is qualified.
But you said it was amended.
But it was amended. It has been consequently been amended to dilute its full impact. Like the Constitution, of course, we had. Everything that in Uganda works, tightens up our system. The only leeway is make it loose. Other than us, coming in to say, can we do better within the confines of the law? We amend the law. So they amended. Consequently, by the time Keith, by the way, left as a PS, what was our GDP to debt ratio? The country was failing. Let me give you a simple figure. He left, I think, last year, 2 years ago.
2 years ago.
Yes.
They're going to make 2
our
years in July.
Debt rollover had gone to 70 trillion in a space of 4 years. Debt rollover is money government fails to pay, which it should pay ideally in a given financial year. It had gone to 70 trillion. So we were failing to pay our debt. 2, they had given away, and I've looked at the borrowing and I've followed it. I think they had lost something that I always blame our economists. There are many economists that waste time. Think you can fix the economy by not fixing the behavior and the nature of the political environment. So they had given in to a life presidency project in Uganda, failed to advise the president.
Who?
All of the elite. This failure is all over. All of us failed. You and Rumenda, this Ofono Pondo, whoever had access in that space, we have failed. And we must take responsibility, by the way, for things that have gone wrong. No matter that I've been trying on a different side, we have failed to tame the appetite of politicians to misuse public office. Completely we have failed. So they failed to manage the politics and gave in. Consequently, on their watch, they could advise. But the question is, why were they not listened to? We must examine it. Why were they not listened to? Why were they ignored? We have now a 535 parliament.
529.
29
elected, yeah.
elected members.
Bloated. Which you call bloated.
Bloated parliament. You have this huge local infrastructure which you cannot finance. When you look at our spending priorities today, bulk of the money in the program, the biggest program today that is funded is government and security. Because government and security takes on the nominal value, it's going to take 7 trillion of our budget. But that is, you are excluding one, parliament. You are excluding judiciary. When you add the judiciary and parliament, you will go to about 9. So it will surpass human resource development and human capital development. It will surpass it. So
Service delivery.
So his expertise was in vain.
So his expertise, as we are speaking now, you've got to get a smart economist to go and clean up what they did. Clean up. He's touched something very critical. That friends to these PSS became so rich. So rich. Is today some of them are the ones lending government. And that debt rollover we are talking about is owned by people, by the way. Some by banks and institutions who go to play golf today, and in the evening they earn their money. And all of these ones are not magical entrepreneurs. You see, it's because they know who was who in the Ministry of Finance. So you have that class of people that came up. And the bad thing is, it's not always, for us who have studied a bit of economics, people who access capital in whatever way, it's not harmful if you invest it wisely. But they are not in production. They are not anywhere. They are in speculation. They are in everything. So
They are gamblers.
they are not gambling. They are now dealing with the real life and enjoying life in a real way. So when you look at the legacy of Keith, I don't think and I'm here to say, it's not one we are going to celebrate, because we are in a total mess. He's just left finance just the other day. Was it a bit?
But I think that Chivumbi has contradicted himself, because he made a very good point. He said that the politics in the parliament, Keith does not sit in parliament to amend the law. The politicians make decisions on debt based on the spending they think will bring them votes. So you cannot blame technocrats. Technocrats are not policy makers. They are policy implementers. Am I correct?
No.
You, the politicians, really, the borrowing is a decision made by you, the politicians, based on your spending priorities. The civil service serves under your beck and call. If the political class do not want anything, it can't happen. I mean, if you want to amend the constitution to remove age limits or term limits or whatever it is, how does the permanent secretary and minister of finance stop you? If you want to expand the size of parliament, how does any permanent secretary or any civil servant stop you? The permanent secretary, the secretary of the treasury or any permanent secretary or any civil servant can give advice. But you see, the politicians will be
Andrew,
at liberty to take
I
or
beg
reject the
we
advice.
shift to the gist of the show tonight.
Oh, okay.
I think we've celebrated.
But I really
rather-
felt I did not want him to
But I
contradict
think-
himself.
We've discussed the mixed legacy of the late Mohakanis.
Kagwanja, even when we really want to shift to the gist of the matter today, I think Mwanga Chivumbi has not contradicted himself. He has said that the elite and the technocrats went into a project
Under his watch.
under his watch. They went into a project of sustaining President Museveni's regime. And even when they would give their intellectual advice, but because there was this man who still wanted to hang on, he would look at the politics and then come and spoil parliament.
But so that
You
is
see,
your point
You
of
saw how
Before you leave it,
parliamentarians
you
were
know why it
beaten.
is very
I think
big.
we are
You saw how
going to dwell on this
parliamentarians were
forever.
beaten.
No,
So
we're not
it's
going
not
to
a
dwell.
contradiction.
It's not what
That
to
is
do.
your
You see,
argument.
Mr.
I'll give you a minute.
Not
I'll
the
give you a minute to wind up. I'll
Just
give you a
1
minute
minute
to
to
dwell
wind
on
up.
that.
that point. You are
You
not
see,
was making.
Mr. Andrew, the role of the elite, both in intelligence.
No, I wanted to focus on the culpability.
Yes,
of
yes,
Keith
yes,
and
I'm
other
coming.
civil servants.
The role of the elite and the role of even the intelligence to the leaders is to go out in a dark room and tell a leader in no uncertain terms that the direction you are going to take the country is the wrong one. And their capacity to persuade the leader to abandon a wrong direction and take a right direction is the measure of their success.
But
If
I
they
think-
if they fail,
Honorable, you
if
seem
they
to suggest that the bad outweighs the good in the legacy of the late Mohakanis.
No, my religion doesn't permit me to say bad things to a dead person.
No, but
I'm constrained by what I believe in.
Kivumbi,
Because the
where
man
I
can't
disagree
defend
with
himself.
you is to say that somehow politicians who have particular interests can be convinced out of those interests.
Okay.
Even if you were in power, you.
Mwenda.
Because me, every day I come on TV to advise the opposition. I
Mwenda,
really give, all the second, I give them advice here for free. You have never taken mine. Why do you think Museveni should take Keith's?
Yes,
I come here
Because Keith is paid to
he's
advise.
paid to advise.
At least I was also produced and educated to advise my fellow Ugandans. When me as an elite Ugandan, I volunteer advice to the opposition, they don't take
Yeah,
it.
you have failed
Why
to
do
find
you
the
think
language.
anybody would take the advice?
You'd find,
of a civil servant?
Andrew,
Well,
Andrew,
anyhow.
you have failed to find a way to package your,
Thank you very
your
much,
advice
Mwanga
in a
Chivumbi.
manner we can take it.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mwanga Chivumbi. Andrew, the storm around Karamoja, the Karamoja Iron Sheet saga, seems to be generating a lot of interesting things. President Museveni has made his stance clear. He's asked whoever got these iron sheets to return them or refund. And he says he will take political action. How vague or complex or clear is the president's letter? And what do you read in the spirit and tone of the letter?
Let me provide context. First of all, when I was a young person between the age of say 5 to 10, I had two heroes. One was called Jesus Christ. The other was called Socrates. Both of them were sentenced to death by a democratic assembly of a large mob or crowd of people shouting, "Crucify him, crucify him." One Athenian assembly, the other one a Jewish assembly at Golgotha. That's what happened to Jesus. That's what happened to Socrates. So I'm always keen or careful when a mob is throwing stones at someone for me to first study a matter. In regard to this case of Mabati, I think that the public, including the president in his letter, are missing the nuance of it. First, the government of Uganda has been distributing Mabati since 2007 through the office of the Prime Minister. If I'm wrong, the spokesperson of the government of Uganda on Fonopondo will correct me. For the last 16 years, every Prime Minister in Uganda has existed, has distributed Mabati. That is one. In regard to the Mabati that are in context of Karamoja specifically, well, let me say this. Government has been distributing Mabati to Karamoja. These, they call them, I think, sidelined areas or something like that. Karamoja, Teso, Bunyoro, Luero, and Rwenzori. Then whenever there is a disaster somewhere, the government does distribute Mabati there.
To the disaster hit areas.
Disaster hit areas plus these 5 marginalized areas. I have named them Rwenzori, Luero, Bunyoro, Teso, and Karamoja. Then there has been Northern Uganda Construction Program. These people know, that is one. The second thing that in this specific case of this Mabati, the government of Uganda had identified, I think, 10,000 iron sheets which were in the budget for Karamoja. When the president visited Karamoja and found that they need to resettle or give something to the guys who were handing in their guns, the former cattle rustlers, the Karachunas, the president suggested a supplementary, which was 39 billion, but only 7.5 billion was earmarked for these iron sheets for Karamoja. So they spent 7.8 billion buying 95,000 iron sheets, which became 105. To clarify to the public, of those 105,000 iron sheets, 80,000 are still in Namamve in the stores there. 20,000 were properly distributed using the security services. Then I think 5,000, or rather 4,000, which were taken by Honorable Kitutu, are not accounted for. So at least we should know that. But there are mistakes that were done. And this is where I need to first speak and listen to Kitutu, whom I failed to access, and now she's in jail. Kitutu's office was calling ministers and telling them, look, or other government officials, including the speaker, the iron sheets here meant, the iron sheets in our stores meant for your area. Government does not have transport. Can you come take them? Those were telephone calls from office of the Prime Minister to the different officials.
Allegedly.
But I'm the one telling you. If you had talked to Keith McCarthy, you would have told you, those are the telephone calls you are saying this, you are doing it the wrong way. So they will call a minister and say, in your area, you have been given the following Mabati. It is not true that these Mabati were written on Karamoja, they were written on OPM. Take an example of Matia Kaseja. He comes from a constituency, an area, Bunyoro, which is called a marginalized area. He was called and said, from OPM, you have Mabati here. He sent, and government has been actually distributing these Mabatis using these same politicians. That's why I find the president doesn't even know. Even in Karamoja all these years, it is MPs who distribute these Mabatis. Maybe NRM was doing it in order to bolster its own political fortunes. But it has historically been done like this. This is the first time that UPDF, because there was one responsible for disarmament, came with a list and said, this is the list. Then OPM would verify and they distributed the 20,000 they distributed. In fact, the interesting part of this story is that the politicians were now not given the Mabati. They are the ones who got angry and whistle blew because they were not the ones distributing. But let me come back to the other ministers. I really feel I should defend them, including the speaker. I am a minister hold a second.
They're in the bracket of the unconscious.
Yes, because we need to identify who is guilty and who is not, or who is culpable. So take the speaker.
I think you're taking away the role of court now.
And
in a way jeopardizing investigations.
Which investigations? There is no. The Speaker of Parliament is not before court. What I was saying, the Speaker of Parliament, the Prime Minister, the Deputy Speaker, the President, the Vice President, all these are empowered to do donations. So it is normal for these 5 leaders, the President, the Vice President, the Speaker, the Deputy Speaker, and the Prime Minister to go and attend an event and donate whatever they donate. It's allowed in the government. I don't know whether it's by law or by practice, it's allowed. So I want us to know which ministers and politicians are culpable and who are not. I want to say that a person like Minister Lugolobi, who they accuse of taking this same mabati written on OPM and using them to roof a shed of his goats or cows, that is clear abuse of power. Kitutu, who gave these iron sheets, if this is true, and she gave them to her siblings who are selling them on the open market, that's abuse of power. But let's just take the speaker. Her office is called, she's called and told, your constituency has mabati here, government is supposed to donate. She sends her people, they pick them, and they go and put them on either on community, church, or government schools, where she has no personal interest or profit. What wrong has she done? Kasaija is called by office of the Prime Minister saying, as they have always done, the iron sheets here for your for people in your community, for government institutions or community institutions or church institutions in your community that are available for you. He sends his people, they go and collect them and they distribute them. He even receives a note, what do they call it, acceptance, because those are
Isn't it strange that before investigations are concluded, you're already listing who is culpable, who is innocent?
Because if a person is, but that's my job as a journalist.
No. You can't be judgmental.
No, it is to investigate and establish the facts. The facts give me judgment and a conclusion. And I don't want the public to think that everybody stole these iron sheets. Because if you and your wife and your children, assuming your son, I was supposed to receive a donation and give it to your son, I went and picked it and gave it to your son, how can you say I have stolen it? I took my bati, I put them in a government school or a government
irregularly.
How can
someone gets things irregularly, and then.
But let me ask you. So I agree. But who should be punished? Because that's why we come now to the president's letter.
They come out and confess that yes, I got.
Let me tell you this: the president said it's very clear. There are those who got them unconsciously. I think that's what the president is trying to explain. The Speaker of Parliament, the Minister of Finance, the Minister for, I think, is it Agnes Nandutu, they were officially called and said, look, there are iron sheets here for your constituency. This has been a practice of government for 16 years. They picked them. They did not take them to the constituency to put them on their homes or put them on their private businesses. They put them on community clinics, community schools, owned by government of Uganda. How can something be stolen from government of Uganda and be given to government of Uganda?
Well, I'll hold you there. And while we're still discussing the twists and turns, I just want to bring you out. Hold it. I'll get back to you. I'll bring you out the list of beneficiaries who are allegedly, actually most of them have come out to confess that yes, I got the iron sheets. There's the minister. Most of them are actually ministers. And there is the list. Kaduchu, the former Speaker Rebecca Kadaga, Honorable Jacobo Both, Honorable Rukia Nakadama, third Deputy Prime Minister, Matia Kasaija, Minister of Finance, Mary Goret Kitutu was the distributor, Obua Den Samson, the government chief whip, then Lugorobi Amos, State Minister of Finance, he got 300. Bwino Chakulaga, State for Agriculture. Well, the list continues. But while we're looking at all this, it's had quite a number of dimensions. One, there are 3 parallel investigations ongoing.
But
one by Parliament.
Mr. Kagwanya,
yes.
You see, I've listened to Andrew Mwenda. He first of all said Uganda has a law called the Public Finance Management Act, has a procurement law. Now, in the public finance management,
hijacked.
Yes, no,
okay.
Yes.
But anyway, you can take the slot.
Clarify this for our viewers, because I see the tendency of exonerating people here, using very colorful language here by my good
Andrew
friend.
told you before he started the show that he interviewed somebody.
Yes, interviewed somebody.
So
No, not
see,
somebody.
let us get, Andrew, let us get these facts clear. For any activity, for any money to be put on any vote, okay, it follows a plan of action and implementation. Okay? So money is voted against a planned activity. Now, for any activity or any donation, the officers that have donations, okay, in their budget, money is budgeted for for donation. The office of the Speaker has a budget for donation. It doesn't solicit from other agencies. The office of the LPM, if it has a budget for donation of a president, it is provided for in the budget. Therefore, you cannot call another agency and say, I'm donating. So that arrangement is wrong. No, hold on. That arrangement.
These people,
Andrew.
But the Speaker is a legislator.
No, Andrew.
The important thing is why he's distorting is to say
Andrew,
you
can you listen
cannot
to him?
call
No,
and
please listen to him.
I will
But
listen
let me
to
correct
you.
for just one second.
Andrew, I want to
Kagwanjala.
listen to you.
None of these people solicited.
No, hold on.
They
Wait
were
a
called
minute.
by government.
Wait a
can call
minute.
Kivumbi and say,
Wait a minute.
As a surprise gift?
not a surprise gift
No,
to
no,
say,
wait a minute.
because government has
Wait
had
a
a
minute.
program for 16 years.
Wait a minute.
Okay.
of
For
distributing-
example,
Mwanga, please continue.
That's why
Hold
it's
it there.
wrong, very wrong. You see, for example, a finance minister, you are the implementer of the Public Finance Management Act. Before you call me and say you have something here, I'll ask you from which vote, from which activity. Where
Can I
did you
answer
get
that?
the money?
Can I answer that?
No. Where did you get the money? Because
You're going to
you are
answer.
the
Please,
overseer and
please,
implementer. Now, for a Speaker of Parliament, I don't want to go very hard on the Speaker of Parliament. For the Speaker of Parliament, you are the one who passed the Appropriation Act, where every money was put against every activity. For the Prime Minister, you are the overall supervisor of all these government agencies. So where on earth does Andrew Mwenda, whom I know, whom I with in the Students' Guild in Makerere,
So you are
Andrew
a grand-
Mwenda,
you are a
you were with the
grandfather
same year. Andrew Mwenda led a campaign to remove the president of Makerere. Was it Galgitho? He was the chief mover in the GRC, where I was. I was the first year. Andrew Mwenda was the one moving a motion to remove Garigitho. For what? Can you tell the public? Garigitho was given money to go to Toronto. You remember? I think he went to Tororo. He went into Tororo and pocketed the per diem.
He went to Fodo's home.
We are from the same village.
There was a Toro somewhere. Regardless.
No, Andrew
But
Andrew Mwenda of the old days.
Has the president's letter brought us to this extent of discussing who is culpable,
But
who is not culpable?
and capable? So the point I'm trying to make is that if we are going to unmask corruption in Uganda, misuse of public offices, hold people to a particular standard in another democracy, Andrew Mwenda, all these people should have resigned yesterday. Even the president, to retain a minister who is in a custody, and you are still retaining him as a minister and paying him taxpayers' money. Because once you are retained still as a minister, still we are paying you. But you are in custody. Don't pretend. Don't pretend.
But anyway,
You see,
first of all, I
you
think...
push. Andrew, tell me you've studied
have said,
comparative.
can I
Yeah,
intervene?
Andrew, you've studied comparative politics. Tell me of any polity that is reasonable, where a minister would be in custody and retained as a cabinet minister. What an absurdity!
Well, the president is promising to take political action.
How do you
Isn't
reach
that
a level?
convincing enough that
how
there
do
is
you
something
reach a
looming?
level that your minister is in custody and is on your payroll?
You know, Kagwanjala,
Yes.
at first, the president did say, you don't even have to carry out investigations
Investigation.
because the thieves are known. When Kitutu came to parliament, she actually apologized that there are errors which were made. I apologize.
Can I start on that very note as we take a very short break? We'll return. Good morning. Good evening.
NBS Frontline. Better steady, be better.
7 out of 10 of us have lost a substantial amount of money to fraudsters.